Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Calaveras Community Television Studios. We're going to have a continuing discussion of water. Water, of course, one of the most, if not the most important subject in this county or any other county in this day and age. With it, you've got a lot going for you. Without it, you're in serious trouble. And we have a chairman of a very, very important organization here with us today, a gentleman by the name of Bruce McClanahan, who is representing as the chairman for CPAC. For CPAC, a very important organization as regards the water flow in the Utica system. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And first of all, for CPAC, very fancy acronym. What's it mean?
It's a long acronym. It stands for Calaveras County Concerned Citizens for Preserving Angels Creek.
Okay, well, you know, these days, Bruce, we hear a lot about concerned citizens about this, concerned citizens about that. You folks really were concerned and really did something about it. How did 4CPAC come to be formed?
Well, it all started with two applications being proposed for relicensing of the Angels Utica hydroelectric projects. One of those proposals looked at cutting 70% of the water that historically flowed through the Angels watershed from Murphy's down through to Maloney's. This wasn't really acceptable to a lot of the interest in the area. And what's unique about 4CPAC is we brought together some very diverse interests. We brought together the environmentalists, the ranching community, the agricultural community, local citizens, and we've pulled ourselves together and we've worked to try and get the best deal that we can and get the most water to preserve this beautiful watershed that exists in the county.
Well, Bruce, let's, for the benefit of our viewers who may not have watched all of the other water shows that we've done on Calaveras Community Television, let's do a brief review. You mentioned that there were two contracts coming up that FERC, and FERC is
Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
All right, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And there were two contracts coming up, and initially NCPA was going to be vying with PG&E on these contracts. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And these contracts had to do with the water that comes out of the water tap up from
Mill Creek.
Mill Creek Tap, which is just by McKay's Point. Okay. And provides the flow down through the Utica Powerhouse into, well, it's called the Murphy's Creek and Murphy's, and the Angels Creek below Murphy's, and down through the powerhouse here, and then ultimately on to Maloney's, correct?
That's correct.
And then by way of further review, along about mid-term in all of these negotiations, PG&E said, no, we don't want anything to do with it. We're going to back out. We want to sell it. We'd like you folks to buy it. And so now we had CCWD on the one hand and NCPA on the other hand trying to buy this from PG&E. And along the way, there was an alliance between CCWD and NCPA, correct?
That's correct.
Now, your main concern initially, when I say yours, I mean your group's main concern, Bruce, was that if NCPA was successful in their bid, their initial bid, it was their plan to divert all but about, what, 10% of the water?
Right. They were only going to leave 30% of the water and historic water flow in the watershed.
Okay, and they were going to divert it over into the Collierville Powerhouse and generate power with it.
Right.
And to you folks who formed 4CPAC, that was a totally unacceptable position.
That was right, totally unacceptable, and we did something about it. We formed together. We've been together for 2.5 years. Again, a diverse interest with political support from everywhere from City of Angels, Murphy's Community Club, Chamber of Commerce, right up onto the federal level with Senator Barbara Boxer.
Business people in Murphy's?
Business people in Murphy's.
But obviously you had an impact on what has happened up to this point with this project.
Very much so. Throughout this 2.5 years, we haven't taken sides with anybody. PG&E, NCPA, CCWD have all been players for the past 2.5 years in very different partnerships, different alliances. We've stayed neutral and said our interest is to preserve the creek. Our mission objective, and I'd like to just go through that, it is the resolve of 4CPAC to protect, maintain, and enhance for posterity the historical and aesthetic, as well as the agricultural, environmental, and recreational value of Angels Creek. That creek started, and the water that came down here was started by the mining interests and local people, and had been a historic part of this community for 100 years, 150 years. We weren't going to see that disappear.
All right, now, you formed this group. Adam Wickert, I believe, was one of the founders of the group.
One of our founders and chairman.
And you're now up to 520?
520 members, probably a few more at this point.
And along the way, in addition to all of your effort here, you even sent Adam Wickert to Washington, at least on one occasion, to lobby in your behalf?
Right. This all is going to take place in Washington. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is responsible for reassigning these 2 licenses, and it's all played out through a series of public hearings and public comment periods, and all the agencies at state, federal level working together. Unfortunately, it's taken a little bit of twist here now with the project up for sale and a new alliance between CCWD and NCPA coming together. You know, that's fine. That agreement and the technicalities of that agreement is between those 2 parties. Our goal is still to preserve the creek and to get the best flows we can through the creek to provide the recreational, historic value and agricultural requirements for now and into the future.
All right, great. You mentioned creek flow. Obviously, creek flow is what generated the people who belong to 4CPAC to get into action.
Right.
In Murphy's, the creek flow issue is somewhat different than it is down in what you call the bypass region of the stream. In Murphy's, obviously, the big concern there was the aesthetics of the park.
Maintain the park.
Right.
And not have so much flow that you might have erosion problems.
Exactly, and yet not have so little that you couldn't have recreation in the summertime. And so a good many people in the Murphy's area joined with 4CPAC, wrote letters individually to Washington protesting what might happen to that flow if NCPA took it over. Now, as we get below Murphy's, however, and get into the area that was initially the area that 4CPAC was concerned about, we get below the diversion creek, the
diversion dam.
Diversion dam, I'm sorry, on Murphy's Creek that bypassed, that took flow out of the creek and ran it into the flume that we see alongside the Murphy's Grade Road. And that left, at least in the last 30-some-odd years that PG&E has owned that, left a relatively small trickle of water down through the bypass region in the summertime, didn't it?
In the summertime, the requirement for that old license was 0.5 cubic foot per second. Fish and Game was already on record for 2 CFS. That requirement has gone up.
Okay.
The NCPA put a proposal together that had some fairly decent flows for the bypass region of the creek. The only problem is they forgot about the City of Angels. They proposed to put only 4 cubic feet per second through Ross Reservoir and the City of Angels water supply. That presented some serious problems for water quality for the City of Angels. So they didn't put the whole package together.
And so now, what is 4CPAC's proposed creek flow, generally?
Well, we've worked closely with CCWD and NCPA. Currently, CCWD and 4CPAC have had meetings almost every month discussing flows. We've talked about 10 cubic feet per second. CCWD has talked about 10 cubic feet per second. Our problem has been how is that 10 cubic feet per second going to come down? We don't want to see all the flow in the wintertime and no flow in the summer. We want to see how it's spread out. We put together a proposal that represents the interests of the Murphy's Community Club, the City of Angels, 4CPAC, water users below the diversion dam, all the way to Maloney's. We put together a proposal that works out to about 11 cubic feet per second on average for the year, slightly higher than 10, but it gives us the flows that we think works best for everybody. In the summertime, it allows water for sale from CCWD to NCPA. It provides at least 20 cubic feet per second for the City of Angels water supply. Doesn't put too much flow through the park in Murphy's.
You've put together a proposal, as you indicated. In that proposal is a purchase water agreement. How do you foresee that taking place?
Well, I'm not sure the exact part of it. What we'd like to see is a guaranteed price for agricultural use. The County Water Master Plan has shown that the development of water supply in the county is going to be based around the Murphy's Angels Camp area. basically, a lot of that infrastructure is already in place. But for the ranchers and the agricultural interests to have an idea of how they can proceed with some of their projects, they need to know what the price of water is going to be to them, and they need a guaranteed price out over a number of years. We'd like to see that agreement in writing.
You folks have also addressed a flood control project.
Well, flood control is certainly a concern for people who live right on the creek. We've looked for a plan, an emergency action plan, and have found pretty sketchy details of what that action plan would be. We think that needs to be beefed up. We also think there needs to be a measure before you get to the emergency. How does the project run when it's raining an inch an hour? That type of thing. How do you prevent from having to go into your emergency mode? We think both those need to be in place, and we don't see either of them in the license applications.
Mm-hmm. One area of your proposal that was of particular interest to me was the public recreational access. You folks have a rather ambitious program in sight for public recreational access.
That's right. All along, one of the things we've had to battle is there isn't enough public access to Angels Creek. There's Murphy's Community Park, which has free access, but in the bypass region, there's been limited access. We think we can increase that access by addition of a new park somewhere along Highway 4 corridor and below Larry Bypass Road. We think that park can be built. We have a way to fund that park, and we think it would provide a good rest stop, a good recreational site for a lot of the community, a good part of the community.
And that recreational area would encompass the creek or be right on the creek?
Be right on the creek is our proposal.
So it would provide fishing and
picnicking. Right.
Okay. And what other than just helping the community, what does that do for the people along the creek? Anything?
Well, aesthetically, I mean, the creek, when you see that creek and it's only half a cubic foot per second going through there, and sometimes it doesn't even reach as far as Stelty Park because it dries up in the summertime, that just wasn't acceptable. It's a viable creek. There are fish that do live in that creek, and they can be preserved and survive and thrive with some more flows during the summertime. So,
while we're on that subject, one other issue that you wanted addressed in your proposal was additional scientific studies. For what purpose?
Well, the applications, when they went into FERC, were a set of documents that was, a good foot high for each one of them. And they included reptile and amphibian studies and plant studies for a large portion of the creek, all the way up to Lake Alpine, which is part of these two projects. But it didn't look at the lower section of the creek, and we think that needs to be looked at. Below, really, as it enters New Maloney's, what happens down there if you remove 70% of the water from the watershed?
Bruce McClenahan, there's no question in my mind, and I'm sure there's little question in the mind of a lot of the folks in the Angels Camp Murphy's area, that 4CPAC has had a very important impact on what's going to happen to water in the Utica project. And you folks that have formed 4CPAC are to be complimented on the work that you've done and the job that you've done. And it sounds good to me, and I think I maybe speak for most of the community when I say it sounds good to me to hear that you and CCWD, along with NCPA, are getting to the point where it looks as though everybody's going to be able to work together.
Right. Well, that's the encouraging part of it. We've built up some trust between CCWD and the local community. We've brought together interests, a wide variety of interests that I don't think has ever happened before, environmentalists to ranching to agriculture, and we're all going to be together at the end, I think, with a good deal for the whole community.
Well, there isn't any question that those of us who have anything to do with Murphy's/Angels Creek, that is to say from the Utica Dam project right on down, owe a debt to those of you who have worked so long and hard for this 4CPAC project. Ladies and gentlemen, Bruce McClenahan. Bruce, by the way, a quality control expert by occupation, but serving now as the chairperson for 4CPAC, and they are the main players in the community's role in the preservation of the Utica project. Bruce, thanks for being on the show with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Ladies and gentlemen, 4CPAC, the community's role in the Utica project.